Just the latest snag to hit a project that some have called a misplaced priority. And with this latest hiccup, it's a good time to stand back and ask, how important is this project? And is it in fact a misplaced priority? Well, to talk about this, I'm joined by Andiwo Obondo. He is an education specialist. He's at our City Centre studio. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Mr. Obondo. Now, as we assess the importance of this project, I want to actually ask you, for instance, only 2,037 of the 20,368 schools that are set to receive laptops are connected to the grid, have electricity. How viable is this project?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nancy. In terms of first, the value and the significance of this project, it is a very important project for education sector today, because of where we are in terms of trying to integrate IT in terms of helping delivery of education. But in terms of implementing the project, I think maybe the strategy that we are using may not be the best. Most of education sector players have favored a computer laboratory approach in schools, and we stagger this based on preparedness. We could start with the schools that already are connected to power, and we can be able to organize computer laboratories that through programmed use can be accessible to all the teachers and all the learners in a particular school. And then we have to make sure that what is required, like we empower the schools first. We need to prepare content like the minister I think has been doing. We also need to make sure that teachers are ready to deliver this program. So I think the idea is good, but I think the strategy, implementation of the strategy is what we need to discuss and possibly see how we can be able to revise, particularly now that the court has taken us back to square one.
Yes, just talking about the court, are you surprised by this ruling?
I'm not surprised by this ruling, because if you look at the complaints or the issues that have plagued this process from the beginning, I think the ministry did not follow the requirements of a public tender of this magnitude. And we had complaints from the Parliamentary Committee on Education. We've had complaints from those who participated in the tender. We've also had complaints from sector players. So I think it is not surprising that the court is asking us to go back to this process. This means that we did not follow the procedures as laid out in law.
So you do agree that that was the right move there?
I think that is the right move there. And what I would say is that it provides Kenya with an opportunity to rethink about the strategy. This project is very good. This project is very important. But I think we need to look at the strategy of implementing it. And we could be able, the ministry could go back and say, could we listen to the voices of stakeholders? Could we listen to the voices of professionals in the sector and see how best do we implement this important project without having to insist on rushing it based on the political promises that we made in the last elections. And we can do what is sustainable, we can do what is achievable, and we can do what is going to be able to be done within the given period of time. Now that we've done more than 2 years of the Jubilee government, we are left with 2.5 or 3 years. That means if we don't do things right, and if we don't focus on the most effective way of delivering this project, it means we may not issue or we may not deliver all the laptops by the time the Jubilee administration is through with its term.
Right, and you've talked about strategy. Now, this is an important one, because we've seen in some cases students having to cross rivers to go to school. In some places they're studying under trees. So obviously the question of priorities comes up. Do you think that the government should in fact abandon this project for now, even seeing as it has so many problems, and maybe focus on some of those other areas first?
I think what I would suggest is not to abandon the project in its entirety, but what I would go for is to revise the scale of the project and look at what other priorities do we have in the sector. Like I would tell you, one thing that the government needs to look at is if we can be able to address the issue of infrastructure in schools, because you'll realize that there are a number of schools in Kenya where you still don't even have the infrastructure where you're going to keep these materials. So one thing is that focus on improving infrastructure in schools, looking at how you address the teacher gap, We are talking of a teacher gap of 80,000 at the moment, and the government is only able to address, employ 10,000 this year, and those retiring, leaving the service, is also more than 10,000. We have schools where the pupil book ratio is 1 to 7, 1 to 8, and even in some cases 1 to 10. So we can be able to look at this laptop project is a good project, yes, but it's not going to help us improve learning outcomes immediately we implement it. So we can be able to say, can we scale this down? And I think, to me, the advice that I can give the government as a professional in the sector is to look at the possibility of going back to the idea of establishing computer laboratories in schools.
Okay.
And then the budget that we save through that strategy, we can be able now to focus on the other more important areas, or equally important areas of improving education quality and delivery of the curriculum.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your opinion with us this evening, Mr. Andiwo Obondo. He is an education specialist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy.
As he said there, it is an interesting dilemma. As some have called it, it is education but batteries not included. And it's also the focus of our big Q this evening. We want to ask you whether we actually want to ask you what you feel about this project.